what prompted Trump to take such aggressive measures against Colombia, and how does this fit into his broader immigration policy?
Well, thanks for having me as always. Donald Trump picked Colombia because number one, Colombia we haven't had in the United States the amount of tremendous illegal immigration coming from Colombia that we have from some of the other Latin American nations. So it was a good test mission for what I don't think they realized is that when they were going to deport the numbers of illegal aliens that were detained here in the United States back to Colombia, I don't think that they saw the pushback from President Petro that actually occurred. And I think that what we're going to see is what they thought would be an immediate cave-in showed that there's actually some pressure that's going to come from our Latin American partners. This is not just Donald Trump able to yield a steel fist in the region. They're going to have to think their way through as they move forward. And if they think that this is going to be a problem in Colombia, wait till they get to some of the more serious violators, such as Mexico, such as the Dominican Republic, such as some of the other Caribbean nations that are occurring. This is going to be a big problem for the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. Colombia's initial refusal to accept deportation flights highlighted human rights concerns. Now, how does this stance reflect the broader tensions between the two nations?
Well, I think what's happening here is that you have a trusted trade partner and a trusted partner in regional operations. Colombia has always been a trusted partner of the United States in the war against drugs, in the narcotics enforcement arena. And I think what's happening here is, and I'm not sure it's showing a necessarily big tension, as is the case with all friends. Sometimes you get into arguments, sometimes there are disputes. What I think happened here is that there was a miscalculation by the Trump administration. I don't think they realized that the domestic issues that come up with trying to impose tariffs on a trading partner like Colombia. Let's take, for example, if you're going to put 20% tariffs on Colombian products, let's look at one of the biggest exports coming out of Colombia. That's coffee. And we all know Americans love drinking lots of coffee. If you think that Americans are going to stand for a $4 cup of coffee going now for $8, that's going to backfire on the Trump administration, especially when they're saying that they are going to be the solution to inflation, whereas the Biden administration was a cause for inflation. If they are going to be using tariffs as some sort of enforcement tool to get their way globally, they really need to recalculate that thought process.
Mm-hmm. Well, the economic implications of these tariffs are significant. How might this dispute affect both the United States and Colombian economies?
Well, as I pointed out, if you just look at the coffee import-export, the issue there is it affects the U.S. economy. You're talking about some major corporations such as Starbucks, for example. Just the supermarket. Where are they going to get their supplies from? There's a much higher tariff on Colombian coffee products.
Without mentioning brands, I'm talking about how this decision could affect both nations, not just only one.
No, it affects both nations.
Yes.
It affects the exports of Colombian coffee, and I'm using coffee because that's probably the largest and most clear example that we're going to have. Any exports that come out of Colombia that are tariffed is going to make it harder for Americans to buy that product, which means for the largest economic power in the hemisphere, that's a huge decrease in the amount of product being out and exported to the United States. At the same time, it's going to hurt American companies such as, let's take, for example, Starbucks again. If Starbucks isn't able to sell
without mentioning brands, could we just avoid mentioning
you start looking at losing employees, shutting down shops, these, and the suppliers that sell them services and products. The ripple effect on using tariffs as a political tool is a very, very dangerous road to go down. I've never been a fan of it. Do tariffs work? Yes. As we've seen, when we look at sanctions and we look at tariffs, there are reasons and there are situations where they are appropriate. Using it for biggest political gain doesn't necessarily work if you're trying to do it with a partner. And then on top of the fact, we also have to realize when you invoke tariffs, the company that is shipping the product, in this case, Colombia wasn't going to pay that tariff. You know who's going to pay the tariff? The consumers here in the United States. That is always the case. And that is something that is never brought up by the Trump administration.
Okay. So do you think that this conflict could set a precedent for how Trump's administration handles resistance from other nations?
Oh, that's a great question. And here's the concern is, number one, if they're using this as kind of a learning curve, then okay, take the lesson. And again, we also have to realize the fact that President Petro and the Colombian government also said, look, we'll accept the returning illegal migrants back to Colombia, but we're going to do it on our terms, on our aircraft. It's going to be done with humanitarian rights involved. But what we also have to realize is the fact is the more and more we put this type of hard sell pressure on our partners globally, there's a very distinct chance, and this is a fear that I have right now, especially with the Trump administration, that our partners and our allies are going to be saying, look, we don't have to deal with this. We will go and we'll deal with the other economic power, and that being China. That has been the whole cornerstone of the Chinese Belt and Road program in Africa, where the U.S. has steadily been losing market share and influence and power in that region. My fear is that every time Trump does this, particularly to one of our regional allies, whether it's Latin America, the Middle East, or Far East Asia, the reality is that we're driving them into the arms of our economic adversaries.
Well, I think this is a very powerful statement.